First of all, I want to get away from the dictionary definition of a constitution. A constitution must have purpose, and the purpose must be to create a nation that conduces to the greatest happiness of the greatest number of people. That is what a constitution must be. And having set the objective of the constitution, you then frame a constitution to achieve that objective.
Because we really do have a race problem. Those divisions are real. We see it in our politics, we see it in our trade union. We see that they take the divisions with them. Look at where people live in this US. You have enclaves in the Bronx and in Richmond Hill and in Brooklyn. They're taking the division with them.
Women are dying in the streets, and we have a government pontificating running around campaigning for women's vote. No women should vote in this election coming up unless there is something done to the legislation as Magistrate Kim is advocating.
That voices like ours that are not in the political trench fighting it out, voices like ours should become stronger. One of the things about the Caribbean is that we have never had one discourse. Bass will know the days of the New World and the Old World and the radical left and so on. What we had was this concourse of ideas, which I think in the early days of independence pushed us in a certain direction. We have got to move back to that point of having these multiple discourses.
Suicide affects us all, but it's especially troubling in Guyana. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tracey Can, and today we'll be looking at the issue of suicide in Guyana, the rate of suicide, the contributing factors, and how this epidemic is being addressed. I do apologize for the late start, so we're going to get right into the program. Joining me today, I've got Rameshwarie Jairam, Miss Berby's 2019, and she is also a suicide survivor. I also have Corey Celeste, the primary literacy promoter for Peace Corps, and Jacqueline Bourne will be joining us a bit later on Jacqueline Cummins, my apology, will be joining us a bit later on the program. Ladies, good afternoon, and thank you for joining me.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I want to get right into things because we're starting this week's program, and it's going to be for a few weeks that we're going to focus on suicide. And I just want to give some depth. Now, Corey, you are a Peace Corps member who is working in Blackbush Polder. Now, Blackbush Polder is on the quarantine in Berbice. It's predominantly a farming area, and that's where most of the suicide occurs, in Guyana and in Berbice. And Corey, you've been exposed to that. We were speaking and you were telling me about the number of funerals you've had to attend since you've been in Guyana, and most of them were in the Blackbush Polder area. Being on the ground and having to deal with this problem so directly, what are your thoughts overall on the issue of suicide?
Yes, Tracey. So thank you for inviting me. My connection might be a little slow, so if you need me to repeat anything, just let me know. I would also like to say before I talk that my opinions are not reflective of Peace Corps' opinions or the U.S. government's opinion. So I just wanted to say these opinions are from my perspective alone. So yes, I live in Blackbush Polder. I've been here for a year already, and I have noticed that suicide is the biggest problem that my community faces. It is prevalent in so much of the culture in the community, and it has affected almost everyone who has lived there. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Corey.
Okay. Yes, so it's very heartbreaking to hear some of the stories and to see how it has affected people. In just the past year, I've attended 3 funerals from suicides. One was a young girl, age 16. I think this was about 3 months ago. And then just this past Friday, we had another funeral of a 60-year-old man who, all the people who commit suicide in Blackbush all do it with a poison, mostly gramazone, I've heard is used. It's a pesticide that they use for the agriculture, the rice farming. And so this is how most people will commit suicide. And I don't know how deep you want me to dive into the topic, but
we'll get into it. I just wanted... Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, but there's a lot of factors, and I'm sure we will talk more about it, but there's a lot of contributing factors. But just from my perspective and being here for a year, I have seen it has affected almost everybody, and I've heard so many terrible stories. For example, one teacher that works at my school, his mom drank poison and died. Upon hearing the news, his father had a heart attack and died. 3 months later, his wife drank poison and died.
Yes. That's someone that I know, indeed. That's someone that I know, and I remember that story in particular where the mother and his wife both committed suicide by ingesting gramazone, and his wife on her dying bed asked him to complete his education. And as we progress, he's someone that I'm talking to and that we're going to have on the program. And I just want to go over to Ms. Jairam. You are a suicide survivor, thank God. Generally, what are your thoughts on the issue of suicide? And, being a Barbician, as I am, what are your thoughts on it generally? Because I think Berbice and, the rural areas are more affected by this issue.
Right. All right, good afternoon. Thank you for having me, Ms. Ken. It's an honor to be on the program. Hi, Corey. It's a pleasure to meet you as well.
Yeah.
I think in Barbies, in general, when it comes to suicide, it's something that most teens think about whenever they're going through a bad situation. If they're dealing with something and they think they can't speak to anybody about it and they can't deal with it in some way, and anybody thinks about that first before they try to speak to somebody or seek help in any way. And it has been an evolving problem from a long time now. It's not recent. And especially in Barbies, for Guyana, especially in Barbies. That has been a going thing for Barbies. For me personally, I never thought, for me, I would actually want to go down that path. I would want to go down that lane. I would want to do something like that. I never thought of it. I remember I would always talk to friends and family if they have problems and tell them that's not the answer, you can't go there. But only when you experience a breaking point, then you can actually understand what people are going through. And you could only talk, like, if it's a stereotype here, then it's like that. But I definitely know now that's not a place I want to go to. And it's definitely something I would tell people, you don't want to do it. There's a lot of things you can do than to not go to that place.
Definitely.
There's a lot of...
Definitely, that's not the answer. And for the persons who are just joining us, I am here joined by Ms. Berbice, Ms.Rameshwarie Jairam. She's also a suicide survivor and an advocate as well. And I also have Corey from the Peace Corps with me as well. And Corey lives in Blackbush Polder. She works there. She has on-the-ground direct experience with what's happening in that area. Blackbush Polder is predominantly a farming area, and so to get things like gramazone, it's very accessible generally in Guyana, because I know that government was trying to put more restrictions on it so that it's not easily accessible, because that's the main way a lot of people are taking their lives, unfortunately. Now, Corey, in your thoughts and based on what you've seen, do you think enough is being done to deal with this issue? And then I want to get into the contributing factors.
Okay. Absolutely not. I do not think enough is being done. I think a huge thing is the resources. I know there is one counselor alone in Blackbush area. And I actually lived with her. She was my host mom, Miss Jacqueline. And she is a very wonderful person, but counseling is not her only job. And so she is a very busy woman. And anytime that there's a poison case in the hospital in Blackbush, they will call her to come and speak with the person. Or if there's family problems, she does some house calls as well. So she's she is very involved in the community, and so she knows a lot about the suicide problem. But there's 4 villages in Blackbush, and there's only one counselor. And it's very rural, so it's hard to get to the other villages. The roads are bad. During rainy season, it gets very muddy. So there's different challenges that people may face to get the resource that is available, even though the resource is running slim because she only has so much time. And to me, I feel like there's no counseling in the schools. So if we see that there's a problem with the child, the teachers try to face it and they try to make contact with the family, with the parents. But to me, in my opinion, there's no follow-up. There's no assurance that that child is going to get counseling. Mm-hmm. There's no follow through with the problem. From my personal experience in the school, I've seen that we've had some cases where suicide in the family happened, or different kind of cases where there's obvious signs of emotional troubling in that child's life, and it doesn't seem like there's any help readily available for the child or the student or the family. So I think if someone really needed help, they had to go and reach out to get it. They would have to go to a hospital. They would have to contact the counselor. It's not so easy. And on top of there's stigma around mental health, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So it is a challenge that other people are going to judge that person, and a lack of confidentiality that, okay, well, if I admit that I have this problem, now everyone in Blackbush is going to know about the problem that I'm facing as well. So to me, as a short answer, no, I don't think enough is being done. But I think there's potential that more could be done if the resources were there.
Okay. And now before I go to Ms. Jairam to respond to the very question, if you think enough is being done, because you've been interacting with people from all walks of life as well, not just in Berbice. But I just want to remind our online audience, you can join in on the conversation. We'd like to hear your views. You can share your stories, your experience directly or indirectly with us, because this discussion really is to bring awareness. Suicide is a really troubling issue. It is around the world, but in Guyana, it's even more troubling, we find. And at one point, Guyana was named by the UN the suicide capital of the world. That was very, very troubling. I know that efforts are being made since that to reduce it, but still, I find that a lot of school-aged children, they're committing suicide. So, Ms. Jairam, do you think enough is being done, and what more can we do, in your opinion?
Actually, I don't think enough is being done, even though people are seeing that suicide is growing in Berbice. There's not enough efforts being made to actually do something about it. People are normally speaking about it, hosting programs, going to schools, talking about it, but more groundwork needs to be done, and having counselors in place, especially for school children, to have them know that if they're dealing with something and they can go to parents or they can speak to friends about it, if there's no confidentiality there's actually a counselor that is professional enough to have you speak your problems to. And in that way, that counselor and yourself is going to figure out a more better way in dealing with your problem than to having you go and actually act upon or think about suicide in the first place. And I think for me, if I had somebody to speak to, that would have been a safe point for me. I wouldn't have even thought about suicide if there was actually a counselor ready to speak to you about a matter you're facing. So I think counselors need to be in place.
Exactly, and we have Baby Roberts online, and she's saying suicide prevention must be seen in the school like a lifestyle curriculum. Totally, and that's what the ladies they're saying. It needs to be a part of the curriculum, or it should be something that is addressed once monthly by counselors, because children are going through so much these days. You have issues like cyberbullying, they have issues at home. Some of them are going to school with nothing to eat, but still they're pushing through. They want to attain an education, they want to step out of poverty. And so now I really want to get into the contributing factors, because so far for the year we've had like 5 school-aged kids taking their lives, the youngest being a 10-year-old. I honestly cannot understand how you're 10 years old and you would take your life. I know a young child, he took his life as well in Georgetown, and his family attributed it to some video games that he was playing. So can we talk about the contributing factors here, and from, of course, your personal experience, but I don't want to just keep this to Berbice or to Blackbush Polder, because persons have taken their lives throughout Guyana, different places in Guyana, but obviously the honest truth is it's more predominant in Berbice, in Blackbush Polder. Corey.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so this is something I've thought about a lot, the factors, because the rates are so high. It just makes you think, like, how could these people be just wanting to take their life this easily? So this is definitely something I've thought about a lot, and I've put a lot of thought into. And it's not just a one-size-fit-all problem. I mean, everyone's going to have a different reason for thinking about attempting. But to me, in my opinion, some of the main factors are the lack of resources. So it is a very rural community, and like we discussed, there's no counselors readily available except for one, which she does as best she can, but there's not the confidentiality, the resources available. Number 2 is the availability of the Grandma Zone because of the farming community. And I'm hesitant to think that even if they took the Grandma Zone, there still needs to be pesticides for this rice. So it's hard for me to imagine that just because they ban Grandma Zone, that another poison would take its place. And it's not the Grandma Zone alone, it's the poison itself. Another thing is the lack of coping skills. So I think when someone faces an interpersonal problem and they don't have any other skills available in their mind to deal with the problem, and on top of that, they've already seen all these people commit suicide, it's just in their mind that, okay, well, this is a solution to this problem. And so I feel like that's a big factor. Another factor that I have to consider is the dropout rates, and the literacy rates. So people are not as educated. Education is not a priority in Blackbush. They make their money from farming and other ways, cash crop farming. So it's not, they don't have other opportunities, and so maybe if they see a problem, then it's the end all be all, because they don't see other doors or opportunities available for them. It's harder to get to. And another thing is alcohol. I know from previous studies, I was a psychology major, alcohol, if you are intoxicated, it increases your risk for suicide, or a lot of significantly high amount of suicide cases have intoxication like hand in hand with the suicides. So I think the more people are drinking and they're already thinking about suicide, the quicker you're going to make that decision to drink the poison. So I think all of these factors together and individually make the problem as bad as it is in Blackbush, but also other places in Guyana. I'm sure a lot of these factors are the same. I mean, the alcohol, the lack of resources, lack of opportunities, dropout rates, literacy rates, and lack of coping skills and family problems, maybe a lack of understanding about mental health and things like that. So I think that's both in Blackbush and around Guyana.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Corey. We're going to be joined in a few by Miss Jacqueline Johnson. She's a community leader and life coach in Blackbush Polder, and basically the only counselor that they have there in Blackbush Polder. And she has years of experience with dealing with persons who've attempted suicide, dealing with the relatives and all of that. We're talking about contributing factors, Ms. Jairam. Being a suicide survivor, how were you able to, what really pushed you to the edge that, you know, you would want to do something like that? Because your issue was that you took pills, and why did you do it?
All right, Tracy. Sometimes you would deal with things and not necessarily know how to actually deal with something. How do you make it stop? How do you make it go away? And you just know, for me personally, being in that position and knowing how I've experienced something like that, is you're at a breaking point. You know that everything just comes crashing down. You think there's nothing left. There's nobody to talk to. There's no help coming in any sort of way. And I was pushed by a lot of things. There were family problems. There were some personal stuff I was going through. And not being able to have a relationship, like even with my family, to know that it's okay to go and speak to them about certain things, or even somebody that was there. I just didn't think of anything. And I just knew that for a second, I could remember a darkness just came over me, and I went to this dark place, and I just felt everything was over. And I wanted the pain to go away. But honestly now, looking back at it, the pain is still here. I still wake up every day and remember everything I've been through. So that didn't really take away the pain. But you have to understand it's your life, and you have to grab a hold of it. You understand what you're going through. Only you can make it go away. Pills and poison and a rope wouldn't make it go away. You and your thoughts, and how you take all that negativity and turn it into positiveness. You're the only one that can do that. And I just think for a lot of people, they have issues that they face. If it's family problem, if it's relationship, there's a lot of things they face, and they think that it's not going to go away, but it will. You just have to speak out.
But I want to know, how were you able to cope with it? How were you able to get over it? Because thankfully, your life was spared. And you also told me that, you know, it was, sometimes people do it for attention, and not the wrong attention, but for love, because they feel as if they're not getting that. Was that something that you felt as well?
I felt a little bit of that, yes. I felt a little bit of that. But looking back at it, you just speak. If there's a problem and you're seeking something, even from family, even from your parents, you say things, because unfortunately, you might not survive when you do something like that. And thankfully for me, I did. But my coping mechanism, like I said, I just realized that when that hit me and I survived, I knew that, you know what? I was made for better things, and maybe I need to come out of this dark place and create something positive for me. And even if it was just reading a book or listening to music, if I was dealing with something and something was bothering me, I'm like, you need to find something that takes you into a safe place. Not always you can be able to. Sometimes you carry yourself to this dark place. If it's not pulling you, you just take yourself to it. And you just have to move away from that. You have to find ways on how you can personally cope with it. And I found my ways. And I still do it up to this day. If it's simple as reading or listening to music or dancing or singing or cooking, I find something to take my mind off of certain things and to know that I'll be okay. I'll be okay.
And also I want to just delve in a little bit into these young people, these kids who are below the age of 18 taking their lives. This is something somewhat of a new trend. And I know of a few incidents where cyberbullying was another issue. And I know both of you touched on having more counselors in school, because these children feel as if they cannot cope. And then, as I said too, a lot of the times they see it as them punishing their family, or this is a way of getting back at their family for doing something to them. If it's that, you know, parents don't agree for a young lady to be with a young man and all of that, they find what they see, you know, to talk about these things. So your thoughts on it generally, on these young people taking their lives?
Well, for me, I think, I don't know, it's somewhat of their mindset, and it's not good. It's very unfortunate that that's happening. But at the same time, families need to create a space or a comfort zone in when kids can actually go to them and speak to them. Parents need to do that. A lot of parents want to be strict about certain things, and they create this side of them that you can't go and speak to them where anything is bothering you. And that shouldn't be the case. I've known, especially in Berbice, especially in quarantine, parents create this whole tight, strict version of themselves, and their children are afraid to go and speak to them about things that they're dealing with. And your parents should be the first people you go to whenever you're dealing with something, and they don't create that. And I think they should loosen up a little. Even if there's a situation where a girl likes a boy and they don't agree to it, or a boy likes a girl and they don't agree to it, I think it's more of sitting down and talking to your child than to be harsh and start yelling and start cursing and start hitting. And actually sit down and speak to this child and lay out all of the possibilities, all of the things that can happen if something goes wrong. Mm-hmm. And they need to think about their future than to what they're thinking about presently now. And I think parents don't do that. And it starts with your home. It starts with parents. It starts with your home.
Corey, your thoughts on that? And Sonia, I'll come back to you. Corey, your thoughts on these young kids taking their lives? And also, I just want to add that the Ministry of Education, I'm aware that they have a mobile counseling unit that is not stationed anywhere, it's mobile. So whenever a student takes their life, it's more of a reactive type service that they provide. You know, when that person would have already, or that child would have already taken their lives, they try to counsel the other children. Because a lot of the times these are things, it's like a pattern. The kids would see, okay, one person did it, and so other kids would do it. So it's more reactive for the students. Your thoughts on that, Corey?
Yes, I definitely agree with you, Tracey. The youngest suicide that I've seen in this area is 16 years old. And I know that particular case, she had dealt with a rape, like a sexual assault. Oh, wow. And I do feel like she was not heard by her family, that it was brushed under the rug from my understanding. And I mean, some things are hearsay, so I don't know the whole story. But I do think that the schools need to be more proactive. And a part of what I want to do here is do things like summer camps where we teach the children social emotional skills, and they will be able to be exposed to other people, and other people might have the same stories or the same struggles as them. Because a lot of times when you feel like you're alone, then you feel isolated, and it will lead you to do things like suicide, because you feel like you have no one else. But when people open up and say, I'm struggling with XYZ, and we can sit in a circle and talk about it, it makes you think, well, I'm not alone, and my problems aren't just my problems. So I really would like to do work in this area in Blackbush, but I would like to see that happening in other schools as well, across the nation, across Guyana, and across, other countries as well. I think it's so important for us to open this conversation, for us to take a look at emotions, to say, okay, well, it's not just that I feel happy or sad. There's a lot of in between. And a big part of emotional skills is to recognize when you're going through an emotion that you are not going to be going through that forever. This is a temporary emotion that you're going to be feeling. It's going to pass. You just have to deal with it as it comes, because situations are always going to come about. There's always going to be a struggle in your life for everyone. And those emotional skills are what these kids really need to focus on. And whether that be a part of the curriculum, I mean, we can't just have teachers write down a list of emotions on a chalkboard and let's copy it. We really have to be engaged in a conversation, and this really has to go further than just, a textbook definition. It needs to be a conversation at home and at school. So I think that's where we would see real improvement.
Definitely agree with you. And I want to touch on this, especially countryside areas, very traditional. And Sonia, you're from a traditional Hindu family. A lot of things are still taboo, not just for you generally. I'm from a mixed background, Indian, African, and a lot of things we could not discuss. Sex was not a word that was ever used in our home. I've never heard my mother say it. So many things are so taboo. And you, Corey, touched on the issue with this young girl who was allegedly raped, and that led to her 16-year-old taking her life. And a lot of the times, some family members, because it would be unfair to say all family members, there's stigma, so they don't want to speak out. So these things are hidden, they're suppressed, and they contribute to that. But Sonia, traditionally, from a traditional Hindu background, and I know you touched on it as well, that too contributes to suicide, to domestic violence, and to a lot of other issues.
Correct, Tracy. I think mostly for me, knowing how my family is, I can speak in general with families in Berbice, in Guyana,
Yes,
how they are. But especially in Berbice, it's like that. If a situation happens, they're not there for you to speak to. And honestly, the world is evolving, believe it or not. Everything is growing, everything is evolving. Parents should actually see that their children are going to school, they need different types of textbooks that they wanted or they ever used when they had attended school. So everything is changing.
And children are more exposed. We're more exposed in general to what's happening in other parts of the world, fortunately and unfortunately in some cases.
Right. So they need to actually see that and to understand that they have to create a place. If things are changing, then parental patterns should change as well. If they've grown in a family, I can remember my mother saying how her family was, how her parents was. So her parents were a bit very strict, and you can't go to them for anything, good or bad. And she tried to bring that into our family, and I was like, Mom, it's not going to work because we are experiencing different things, and we need to actually speak to our parents now, because sometimes parents are the only persons you can go to when everything comes crashing down. They're always going to be there for you. They're always by your side. They're always on your team. So they have to create that pattern for their children. So I think parents should actually step out of that in Berbice. They should move away from that a little, seeing how everything is changing now, technology and everything else. That's the only problem we have, and it needs to change.
And I think soon we're going to have Ms. Jacqueline Johnson join us on the show. But Corey, I want to know how much of a contributing factor is customs and traditions to this issue, in your opinion?
Yeah, let me think about that answer. It does seem like things are very traditional in the sense that I live in a predominantly Indo-Guyanese in my village in Blackbush. So I know Indo-Guyanese might be a little different than other customs and culture and other um, in other ethnicities in Guyana. But from what I've seen, it seems like, especially for the young girls, that the families are very strict on the girls. They want them home at night by a certain time. The dating culture is very strict. Like they cannot openly date or have boyfriends or girlfriends. And it seems like for the girls, that they push certain standards. I mean, the boys too. So gender stereotypes are there as well. And that might be why boys have a hard time expressing emotions, because they're expected to not express those emotions and to deal with it. But I'm an outsider, so I don't know all the customs and traditions. I just know from what I've observed by living in families and seeing different things being expressed in the culture. It's hard to say what will contribute to the suicide as a factor and what doesn't, because it's not just point blank, it's not black and white. But obviously it is a big problem, especially in my area. So it does make you think, what about this area, or the way that people are living here is contributing to this problem.
Yes, definitely. Thank you there, Corey. Is Jacqueline ready to join us? Well, she's going to be joining us in a few. And as I was explaining to you, Jacqueline has been living in Blackbush Polder for many years, and she has first-hand experience of how to deal with this problem. And she has so many stories to share and so many ideas as well that she would be sharing with us on how we can deal with this issue. And she is also a part of the Maybe Community Developers Group, where they offer counseling and different types of help to persons who are dealing with this issue. But Corey, I'd like to ask you, based on all that you've seen, the different suicide matters that you've seen, which one really stood out to you and affected you the most when you heard the circumstances surrounding their death?
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry. It's raining kind of hard outside.
Oh, that's where we're getting that sound from. We were all wondering what's happening suddenly. Okay.
It's raining. Rainy season.
All right, Corey. So you've been exposed to persons taking their lives in Blackbush Polder, but I want to know which one really touched you the most when you were exposed to the circumstances which led to that person's death. Which one really, like just really got to you?
I think, as I mentioned before, with the 16-year-old girl, her situation, that really got to me, especially being at the funeral, and I saw secondary school girls come, and a whole group of secondary students came to her funeral, and me just sitting there and then seeing the family, and I knew some of the family just from being in the area. Like, I wouldn't say I'm very close, but like I knew some of the family, and just seeing how everyone was, and it was just very, very sad. It touched me a lot, and I was crying at the funeral as well. I didn't know this girl personally, but like I said, I knew some of her family. 2 students at our school was family to her, and her uncle I had known since I got to Blackbush, and he was very nice to me. And after her suicide, after the funeral, I sat and talked with her uncle, and he would come to the school, and I just asked, about the situation, and I'm very careful when I ask about that because I know that it might, rehash some things with people, and I don't want to open any wounds that they don't feel comfortable talking about.
Yeah.
But he had told me the situation, and that after she drank the poison, like he was there. It was 11 days after she drank the poison that she had died, and they brought her to the hospital and they checked her out, and she was complaining about her stomach issues, and then they brought her back, and then she left again, and she was able to eat and everything. And I think they were hopeful because it was so long after she had drank it that she passed away. But it was from what I've heard, it was the sexual abuse, and supposedly the person who did this went into the bush, and they couldn't find the person. So that all of it was a very difficult thing to see, and to see the family really breaking down, and it makes it so real. Like, this suicide issue isn't just affecting the people who are killing themselves, it's affecting everyone. It's affecting their family, it's affecting her friends, it's affecting me, who is a complete foreigner but is witnessing all of this firsthand. It shook me a lot. And I would like to say one other story that really also got to me. I mean, all of them, obviously, I don't like hearing about the suicides, but one other story, it wasn't in Blackbush. It was actually on the road in Berbice here, close to Port Morant. And it wasn't a suicide, it was a suicide attempt by a young girl. She did not successfully kill herself, but she took pills. And when I think she was 16, so this was about 3 or 4 years ago. And she's permanently disabled. She cannot make coherent speech.
Oh,
She
wow.
cannot go to the washroom by herself. She cannot do anything alone. And her mother is left to take care of her. The father abandoned the family.
Oh, wow.
Thanks to Food for the Poor, they have a small house. But I mean, this family has nothing. They're living off the government's aid because the mother has to watch after this young girl every day. And they're living off of very little money. I mean, I want to say $4,000 or $5,000 a month, which is literally nothing. And even like I went to the house and I visited this woman and the young girl, and it was so heartbreaking that this, not even just that the girl survived and it is in this state, but that the mother has to sacrifice her whole life, and the family stopped talking to them, and just so many different problems resulted from this one young girl's decision. And the reason why she did that is because of also a sexual abuse case. She was assaulted by some boy, and I guess she couldn't find any other way to cope with it, and so she wound up taking pills. And I mean, that situation was also very, very sad.
That's devastating, and I mean, for the persons who are now joining us, Corey is just sharing a story of a young girl. How old is this? Was this girl, Corey?
She was, I believe, 16 or 15 when she did this, and now she's around 20. This was four years ago. She is still alive. She is living with her mother and her mother's care. She has to be watched 24 hours a day. I think she has to be fed, but she can swallow and everything fine. She cannot form coherent speech, and she can't go to the washroom by herself either. So her mother has to do everything for her.
And
It's very sad.
And that's the thing, that's another thing too. Like, most of the times in being a journalist, we focus on the people who would have attempted suicide and they survived, and the persons who actually died as a result of suicide. And here you're saying a 16-year-old girl who was allegedly assaulted by some boys attempted to take her life by consuming pills. She did not die, but she is permanently disabled, and her mother has to care for her, and the father left the family. and they're living off of support from the government. That's just heartbreaking and devastating to hear something like that. And now the mother has to permanently care for her. She was unable to cope with what she went through, being abused. I guess she saw it as having no other choice, and that's something that she did. This is a real issue, and I want for people to understand that it's not just, yes, the possibility does exist that you could live and then you die. You're making a rash decision, and this is something you highlighted, Corey. No feeling is permanent. We're going to go through all types of things in life, ups and downs. We're not going to always be happy. We're not going to always be sad. But, you've got to be strong and ride the wave, because, and I don't want to get spiritual, but there's a time and a place for everything, a time to be happy, to be sad. And sometimes when it's our time to be sad, we've just got to take it. We've just got to find people that would listen to us, that would counsel us to be able to cope with these things and get through it. There are many people that we can talk to. I know sometimes it's a confidentiality issue, but I'm sure there must be one person, even if you don't have that relationship with your parents, go to them and talk to them. At least you'll feel relief dealing, getting that off of your chest. Sonia, you being a reporter, I do remember being your editor when you visited a family in Skeldon, and a 60-year-old man took his life. And that was the first time you actually did a story on suicide, and you came back and you were in tears after you spoke to the family. I know that's one suicide issue that really stood out to you. Can you tell us more about that? And is there any other story that really tore you apart?
All right. But well, for that one in particular, I remember I spoke to his wife, and she was saying that, well, he always has problems with alcohol. He's in substance abuse. And every time he gets drunk, he would always say he's going to do it, he's going to do it, but he never really acted upon it. So they were in shock when they actually found out that he was upstairs. Um, he had hung himself and he's there. And they were looking for him and trying to ask neighbors if they saw him anywhere and stuff like that, but not knowing he already committed the act. And when I spoke to the wife, she was in tears and she was just telling me how much she's going to miss him, even though he was her only company, even though she has her grandchildren and her children. And she was just relating to me how their relationship were. And I don't know, I got so heartbroken because knowing that they're a couple, they've been married for so long. And even though he had his bad side, he was still there with her. And to know that one day he's not there anymore, he actually committed suicide and he died. And it just struck out to me. I was completely in shock when I did that. Completely.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to persons, even if I went to do a story, if it's of a completely different story and you're just speaking to family and they would actually start sharing things that they feel. I remember talking to this one girl, I went to do a story with a family, and she was just relating to me why her parents are going through situations is because they have problems home, and she thinks they're not there completely with her. She thinks that she's completely alone, and she was having problems living with them. She wanted to move, even to go live with friends or anything. But I remember that one story in Curviton with that 60-year-old man, even though I didn't know him personally and I didn't know the family. But when I left there, I was very emotional.
Yeah. Ladies, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we were unable to get Ms. Jacqueline Johnson. We will be continuing this discussion, so we're going to have her on the program. We're going to have family members who have been and are affected by the issue of suicide, psychologists. So we will be discussing this issue from various angles. This is the first program on the issue of suicide. And I'm so thankful that both of you were able to join us. I would just have your final thoughts or your advice to persons who are looking, who are listening, and they're going through different challenges and they may have a small thought, a large thought, a big thought on doing something like this. I'll have you go first, Sonia, and then Corey.
All right. Well, I just want to say for me, actually committing that act and thinking about something like that, knowing where I stand today, who I am today, what I've become from all of that, it's not worth it to actually do something like that. Because if I had died, if I didn't survive, I wouldn't have been here for my family, for my friends. I wouldn't have been who I am today. I was in journalism. I now Miss Burbies. I did a lot of things and now I'm in a happy place. And to look back at where I've been to now, I would have never been here if that had actually taken my life. So I just want to say to persons who are dealing with something, trust me. I am somebody who's been there. I am not speaking on behalf of somebody else's experience. I'm speaking of my own. It is not going to last forever. You're the only one that's there for you, and you have to actually take yourself to a happy place and to know that it is not going to last. If there's nobody there to talk to, you sit and think to yourself, is this something I really want to do? Me, as my person, and call your name. If your name is Sonia, your name is Natasha, whatever your name is, call your name and say, do I really want to do this to myself? And not only put myself through it, but my family and my friends. And if you just answer those questions honestly, you're not going to do it. It's not going to last. Find coping mechanisms. Find a way to create a happy place for you and not going to that dark place anymore. It's not going to last.
Corey, your final thoughts on what advice would you give persons who are dealing with various challenges and maybe even contemplating this, and for the persons, who are not, but, to deal with different problems, to find coping mechanisms?
Yes. So I watched a video one time. I think it was a documentary, and it was about people who have jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived. And they interviewed a lot of different people. I mean, not a lot of people survived, so it was a slim percentage.
Oh, wow.
And they say, all of them said, that split second after they jumped, instant regret. They instantly regret it. So for those people who are really thinking or really in that low spot, I would say, really check your thoughts. When you end your life, you're not only ending the bad things, you're ending the good things too. You're ending your misery, but you're also ending the potential that you have for happiness in the future. Like I said, not all things are going to last forever. These emotions are not going to last forever. The bad emotions and the good emotions are not going to last forever. They're temporary. And I think a big thing is to recognize your own thoughts. And for me personally, a skill that has gotten me through some hard times is gratitude. And so for those people who are really in a low spot, I would say every day when you wake up, think of 3 things that you are grateful for. Even if you have barely anything or you're going through a really tough spot, if you can wake up and say, I'm glad I have a roof over my head, I'm glad I have this friend in my life, I'm glad I can walk today. If you focus on the good things, it's going to change your mentality and it's going to change your life.
Indeed. Well said, ladies. Thank you so much, and we'd like to thank Globespan 24x7 for providing this platform that we can have discussions on these issues. This week we focused on suicide, and recently we were talking about domestic violence. A person shared their view. So Globespan is doing an excellent job with this platform that we can have discussions like this. And even when we did the topics domestic violence, a lot of people personally reached out to me and they started to share their stories and started to say they're going to share their stories even more so that more people could understand, because they felt so convicted, and it was not because of me, it was because of our guests coming forward, being so brave to talk about this. And Sonia, I must commend you for speaking on this issue and being brave to share in an effort to help other people, because there is stigma attached to it, with people sharing their stories if they've contemplated or even attempted suicide. So both of you ladies did such an excellent job sharing on this issue, and we're very, very thankful to have you on the program. I just want to encourage everyone that's watching. Remember, your problems are not going to last forever. Seasons change. You're going to be happy, you're going to be sad. You just have to find things, as Corey said, find things to be thankful for. You have your health, you have your strength, your family is alive. Yes, you're going through different problems, but they're not going to last forever. And that's going to build you, it's going to build your character. So do not give up. And I also would like to share with you, for the persons who are in need of professional help, we do have the suicide prevention hotline. And these are some numbers that you can call if you need professional counseling. You can call in Guyana 223-0001. That's 223-0001 or 223-0009. And you can also call these cell phone, and these are toll-free numbers. So even if you do not have credit, you would be able to call these numbers, compliments of GT&T and Digicel. You can call 600-7896 or 623-4444. Even if you do not have credit in your phone, you can call these numbers if you just need someone to talk to. They don't even know who you are. So you're going to have that confidentiality, and you will be able to speak with them freely about what you're going through, and they would be able to advise you. Find a pastor, an imam, a pandit, anyone respectable in your village that you can talk to. Suicide is not the answer. We thank you and do enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Join us again at 2:30. We're going to have a really wonderful discussion, youths and the political landscape. I have some exciting guests and very vocal speakers. So you definitely do not want to miss that at 2:30, youths and the political landscape. And remember to share this page, like the page, and tell a friend to tell a friend. So I'll see you here again at 2:30. Thanks again, ladies.
Yes, thank you, Tracey.